In another life, I could have worked for you, Holly.
Can you imagine the things we could have done together?
Wait, I didn't learn this. How is this not taught at sixth form, even at university? Finance and money, career and business, well-being and relationships. And each of those is just as important as the other.
Welcome to the Anything is Possible podcast. Today I have with me Gaby Mendes, founder and CEO of Talk Twenties, which is a podcast and live events. So I am super nervous today because she's the host of her podcast, which is doing so well and has so many listeners. I feel a little bit nervous today. Gaby, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Woo!
I'm excited to chat to you.
Oh, well, your podcast is doing amazing. You've got 50k followers on TikTok and 10 on Instagram. You've only been going since 2020.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's just brilliant what you're doing. Tell us, for anyone that doesn't know Talk Twenties, just give us like a brief overview of what it is and what you do.
To put it in the most simplest form, we help you figure your shit out. Are we allowed to swear on this podcast?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Sorry, we just sweared in the first minute. I'm sorry, any children listening in the car. But yeah, we help you figure life out because it's confusing, right? You go all the way through school, university, whatever it is, your big pieces of education, and then you might finish up education in your 20s and you step out into the big wide world, and there's so many things that just school or university hasn't prepared you for. So whether it's finance, career, relationships, all those kind of things, we cover it on the Talk 20s podcast and also at 20s Fest, which was our live event that we launched this year as well.
Well, we were chatting before, and I think obviously I'm a lot older than you, and I was looking at the disparity of your 20s versus my 20s, and I was saying, like, the first half of my 20s, I think I was partying and burying my head in self-help books from broken relationships, and then the second half of my 20s I was battling with my mental health, and I was thinking about you and how successful and powerful you are, and to be doing this, you know, you're 28 now, what you'll be doing at my age, I mean, it just blows my mind what you'll have done and launched by then. But we were talking about what you're doing now probably wouldn't have appealed to my time when I was in my 20s. How do you feel it's like? I feel like you're just tapping into the market at the best possible time.
Yeah, I think I think you and I both love like how it is in the States, where there is this very much like self-development, like everyone's got to do like be improving their lives. And slowly we've seen so many things come over from the States, right? And good or bad, right? Yeah. But one of the things that is slowly coming over is this idea of like, you can create a life for yourself and you can improve your life, and you don't have to just take it as it is. And I guess our podcast is naturally just ends up being that way. Like, we started off as just like educating people, but then naturally people came to us as like, actually I really want to get more confident, or actually I really want to earn more in my career, or actually like I don't want to just like sleep around with people, like I actually want a serious relationship. And so we were like, okay, well, where can we find the people who can help give advice on these sorts of things? And it's naturally led down that path at a time where everyone is really being way more receptive of that. But one thing I will say is that we never we have 4 key pillars in our platform, which is finance and money, career and business, well-being and relationships, and then fun and adventure. And each of those is like just as important as the other. They're like 25%, 25%, 25%. And I think back at, you know, when you were talking about your 20s, it was probably more like 50% social and stuff like that. Whereas we don't say, you know, you still should be having a good time. Like, I don't want to be spending all of my 20s just like graph. Like, you've got to enjoy it at the same time, and I don't think that's ever gone away. So
I think it's funny because although I was like partying and everything like that, I think I had a natural interest in personal development. So I've no joke, like I remember paying for a counsellor when I broke up with a boyfriend. I mean, who does that? So weird. But basically I had this appetite for like learning and healing and so much curiosity about the mind. So like, I think if 20s Fest had been around when I was in my 20s, even though it probably wasn't the right time for it, I'd have absolutely loved it. So but what I love about your story is it's not just come from, right, I want to be a podcast host and I want to be someone on social media. It's born out of the fact that your original career started in teaching. And I love the story that you were teaching a sixth form age 22, and so you dress as a grandma basically.
So I had like, so I did education at university. Yeah. I loved my degree, but it was very theory based. It was all about the psychology of, you know, how we learn as humans, history, so many different areas, and it was all theoretical. There was no practical. It wasn't like teacher training or anything like that. But most of the people on my course went on to be teachers, and I must admit, I got to the end of uni and I panicked. I was like, what am I going to do with my life? I love the subject matter, but I don't know what job there is that can do that. And literally everyone was like, you could just go be a teacher. So like at the time I kind of went and did my teacher training, even though it wasn't really what I wanted to do. And in my second year of teaching, I got given a form of sixth form students, and I was like 21, 22 at the time. I was so young, and I don't know if they'd probably just gone, Miss Mendes, sixth form, and it was eye-opening, because they'd ask me questions about stuff and I'd be like, how is this not taught? Like, and then I'd be like, wait, I didn't learn this at sixth form or in even at university. Just things like, what's the difference between a credit card and a debit card? Or I've just broken up with my first long-term boyfriend. I feel absolutely lost. What do I do? And just all these real personal things. And I was just like, God, there isn't anyone that talks about this kind of stuff. So like a big seed was sown there. And I like have quite a business head on my shoulders, but have never done anything with business. I never studied it at school or university or anything. My parents aren't entrepreneurial. And so I was like, I feel like there is something there, but I need to go and work in business to be able to go and do that. So that's when I left teaching and I started working in the events industry, and I did 2.5 years there before the pandemic happened. And like initially this idea came about that I wanted to do the events for 20 something. So like this great big festival where you could go and learn all of this stuff. Yeah. But obviously COVID had other ideas.
It's funny, isn't it? Because when you obviously were like teaching, and then this, like, as you say, this seed, this gap, and really similar. It's why I just literally love talking to you. It's really similar for me, but in a different way, that when friends, etc., were turning 40, they were just, you know, they were like, oh, my life's over, it's too late to change. Even people like in their 30s, it's too late to change. Like, I've got this career, I can't do anything else, I'm stuck with it. Like this real like negative, and totally different to you, but almost seeing that gap where you could change people's mindset. And that obviously was something that you felt like would be really inspiring for you to do. So you moved to events, and what did you not like that in the end? Like, what was the journey there?
I liked it. I've never thought I'd ever work for myself. Like, it's actually pretty crazy that that's happened in this short like time frame that it has, because I never imagined that I could work for myself or even be an employer of other people. It wasn't on my radar like at all. So I just always thought that like whatever I built would be alongside a career in something else, where someone else was paying my wages and I was working for them and then doing stuff on the outside. So I started working in the events industry. I ran business to business trade shows, exhibitions, award ceremonies, stuff like that. So I did like events at the NEC, you know, where they build an event overnight and then you know, it's there for 3 days, loads of business networking, stages, all that kind of stuff, and then they have an award ceremony in the evening, and then it all gets teared down the next day, and you start planning for the next year. The next week you're back in the office. That's what I used to do. And I was good at it. Like, I worked my way up in the company really quickly and was doing really well until the point when COVID hit. And obviously, you know, from doing what you do, like events industry just took a massive hit, and you know, I wasn't put on furlough, but my hours were reduced, and it afforded me the time to be like, you know, I'd literally in the January 2020 announced that I wanted to do an event for young people, and I was probably going to do it in like the June. And when I say do an event, I meant like the smallest networking,
like the side hustle that you just
just tiny. I just thought I'll be 50 people. I'll get a couple of local speakers, and it would just be really small. So I kind of thought I'd do that in June, and then by, you know, obviously March we were all in lockdown. So I was like, how am I going to do this? I was like, I had an idea, like I'd do a podcast to just like introduce what it was about, and the podcast just took off. So it was locked down, you were at home, so obviously we'll have a lot of people listening, whether in their 20s, 30s, whatever, and they might have like a little idea that's like bubbling. What did you do? Like, what was your process? Were you writing it down? Were you researching? Like, how did you come up with the name? Yeah, oh my God. I guess I did a lot of this, which I think I've just always gone with my gut, which I think is a really hard thing to describe to other people. And I find it never helps when people say on the podcast, oh, I just went with my intuition. But ultimately, if something is calling you, I think every time that I've not listened to my gut, I've then regretted. So I think if something is telling you to go and, you know, do all this research beforehand, there's a reason why. Like, don't skip it. So I used to just listen to other podcasts, like, you know, I really liked Fern Cotton's Happy Place, which is funny because I bumped into you at their festival earlier in the year. And I just love like what they'd built. You know, I think, you know, Diary CEO was kind of starting, but not starting. I actually listened to it before it even became what it is today.
Me too, like when I think about it now.
So it's mad. So I kind of knew about podcasts. And then honestly, I was looking to people like yourself, as you know, we've got a funny story about that. But like, I was looking for what people were building, and I just was like, you know, trying to surround myself with people who I thought were doing amazing things, and just trying to learn what I can. Like, you know, I've just kind of started there, and you know, with the idea for the name and stuff like that, I think I've still got it on my phone, like just in notes where I had like loads of different options, every single one that was going on my brain. I went into like words that begin with T, just looking at all the different options. I think I had turbulent 20s at one point. I had tempest 20, I don't know why, like, but none of them seemed right until I literally just landed on Talk 20s. Yeah.
That's funny. I've got the notebook from before I started making events. I don't know why I would have called it this. And I've written like Moo Marketing down, like with this weird logo. But it's funny how like you just start progressing, don't you, through different ideas. So you're at home, you've come up with a name. And your first podcast, did you record that at home? Because I know you're in a studio now.
Yeah, for a long time.
So talk to us about that, because I bet you get this all the time. How do you start a podcast? Yeah. So for the people listening that might just want to do it themselves from home, what was like the A to Z process?
I think how you start a podcast now is different to how you start a podcast back then, because I do think that if you really want to do like very well in podcasting, like there is definitely a video element now that people want to see the video side of things. Whereas I think when we started back in the pandemic, like the barrier to entry was like so much lower because it was literally a podcast mic, and Zoom just became a thing, didn't it? Lockdown, what was Zoom beforehand? Like, so I just did that. Like I used to just get people who I really interested with on Zoom. We'd record, but it'd be like, do you know what I mean? Like it wouldn't be good. That's going to look awful on camera. But it's just like so stop-starty. And I think, you know, as soon as I realised that we had a couple of local guests. Yeah. So I had one of my really good friends now, Olivia, who runs a company called Girls in Marketing, and they really grew in the pandemic. She's Liverpool-based. So I was like, why would we do it over Zoom? Like if you're literally like a 10-minute drive from me. And it was when things was like starting to opening up in lockdown. So I went to her flat, and it's funny because she's had like 4 different places that she's lived in since then. We went to this flat where she was living at the time, and I visited her, and we didn't do video, but we just did the recording in person with a microphone. And I was like, wait, this is way better than doing it over Zoom. So any opportunity that I could where someone was local, I would then record with them in person. And then we found a studio that we started working with and have worked with for a really long time. And they've kind of grown at the same time. We kind of say our businesses are like brother and sister. They're like grown up at the same time, which is really nice. So we've been able to work alongside them to grow. And I think one of the things is we just went with video early. Like I think we've just gone, where's the trend in podcasting going? Let's lean into it. It's going into like short form content. It's going into video first. Like where is that taking us, and how can we make sure that we're still doing everything we can to like our message is the most important thing we can come back to. You can strategize all about the business side of things and how you physically kind of do it, but I think the messaging combined with that strategic thinking of where is the podcast as a form, or where are events going as this form together, that really is what makes gold, I think.
And when did you were doing it like that, when did it suddenly then become more serious? Was it as we were coming out of lockdown? Like what was the process from going, I'm on furlough or whatever it was, I've got this name, you know, how did it grow?
So the crunch point for me, and I would say it came earlier than everyone else, was basically I'd obviously been put on furlough, wasn't like doing like much in my role of events, you know, so I wasn't put on furlough, my hours were reduced, and like they all of a sudden they wanted, and so when they came back I was like, I actually want to stay 4 days a week, and they were like, okay, that's absolutely fine, like we'll you know, that's fine, you can stay 4 days a week. But then the workload just started becoming like, it was 4 days 5 days a week, but into 4, and I was only getting paid for 4, and I was just getting absolutely bombarded when I came back to work. And I was like, look, I just can't really do that. They were like, can you just come back to work for like 5 days? And I was like, well, how long do you want that to last for? And they were like, you know, that's what we want. And I was just like, do you know what, it is, I took a gamble, like a huge gamble, like it was making like a small amount of money, but when I say small, like not what I was bringing in my salary. And I always tell people now, like, don't do that, like definitely don't do that. But I think it was also kind of like I had to make it work. Like I knew I believed in it so much that I was like, I'm just going to make it work. So I ended up handing in my notice and going out on my full-time
So
on my
I
own.
didn't realise that. So you were working your 4 days and doing the podcast, and before you left, you had started to be able to monetize it a little bit, had you?
Oh, yeah.
That's so interesting. So how did you do that? Because like you're saying, you're not necessarily, you've done a teaching education degree, you're in events. Like, where's that commerciality come from?
I don't know. I think like I started to understand, I guess it's like podcasting is kind of tapped into influencer marketing in a way, hasn't it? So I started to, I had I had a little blog that I had on the side, and like I started to understand how people were obviously monetizing their social reach through, working with brands and partners. And I think I just got that side, like it just made sense to me. And I got approached from quite a few different companies to be like, can we do a like brand partnership and stuff? And like it wasn't loads to begin with, but I was like, I know that there is scope for that. So
and how many listeners did you have at that point?
I don't know at that point. I think it was probably, I couldn't tell you, but like I think it was like a fraction of what we get now. It was still kind of small, but I think, I'll be honest, I think I monetized mainly on the social side of things more than actual podcast listens, because I remember we had a podcast sponsor early on in the beginning that literally gave us like 50 quid, which barely covered the cost of like getting the studio and stuff like that. Like 50, I was like, great, thanks. But I started off from there, and they wanted to do like, we'll give you 50 quid, but we'll do loads of stuff with affiliates. And then the affiliates, their link was like completely broken, and so it didn't matter, they still got the same benefit out of it, but like it didn't work out. So I just guess like it was just all through like not being scared that like to fail in those sorts of things, like just give it a go and be like, so I have been lucky, like we had quite a lot of inbound inquiries and stuff, but then since then have been more like proactive about it.
And did you, because obviously TikTok we all thought was just a dancing app when it started in lockdown, and when did you jump on that pretty quickly? TikTok?
Late, I'd say.
Really?
Yeah, late.
Oh wow, Gwen.
Because I remember my sister, she was doing like TikToks in lockdown, and there's a really funny video, but her video went viral with my brother, and they're doing this, it's not a dance, it's like a challenge where like he like climbs like they're doing that, and then my mum walks in the video just through the background, just like nothing is going on, and they're being like complete donuts, and she just walks back and she's like fluffs up a cushion and like sits down, but they don't really realize that she's there, and there's so many comments going, oh my god, like the mum that comes in, like it's so funny. And that grew my sister's like random TikTok account to like 18k followers. Wow. And I was like, so random, but they were all like all foreigners or a bit weird and stuff. And I was like, okay, what is this TikTok thing where you can get like 2 million views and then that can happen? But what made me think it was so interesting was actually the fact that like my mum works in a school, and kids from her school had said, I think that's Mrs. Mendes. And I thought, so there are a load of people that have seen this that are just like foreigners and weird, but it's also reaching people that genuinely know them. So I was like, that's really interesting. So I think I kind of grasped that concept there. And I genuinely used to say to my sister, like, how have you got like 18? She was like, I just did that viral video and they just came. And that
wasn't meant to be a viral video, was it? She won't have put any strategic.
Oh, it was no strategic. It was nothing to it. And I started to see how that was kind of work for people. And so I thought, we'll try pushing TikTok as a platform. And then so I started doing that, and I started to really see, and people who've been in podcasting for a really long time will really hate on TikTok. They really don't like the fact that like you actually can really grow a podcast from that side of things, because they're very like traditional and all that kind of stuff. But we could start to see that when we were going viral on TikTok, the downloads would then increase alongside with it. Now, okay, yes, the conversion is crazy because you might get 1 million views on a TikTok and you're not getting 1 million views on your downloads, but there was correlation. So like, why wouldn't you continue? It's free. It's very easy to do. And so when I made my first hire with Georgia, I was like, we're going to go really hard on our TikTok. In the past year, and then last year we averaged just over like I think 486,000 views per guest on TikTok. We have 50 guests per year, so like that's what we averaged. Like, so not only are they getting the exposure of coming on the podcast, but a clip could go viral. We had people off the back of being on the podcast get invited to go on Talk TV with Jeremy Kyle and tell their stories. Like, people have used it as an opportunity to like build their own brand by coming on the podcast. So I think we just tapped on lucky.
So in terms of like how much like time you put into TikTok, like how many times are you posting a day?
We usually create around 6 clips per episode.
Yeah.
I say we, that is Georgia and my team.
Yeah.
So we usually look at the peak points. We don't use anything. A lot of people go,
we were
use
talking
the
about this
AI
before,
thing.
yeah.
So we don't. Like, we go with what we feel like is going to be interesting to our audience. And we might pull out something that is like a hook from the bits, so something that's really juicy, put it at the front and then play the whole clip.
Yeah.
And so we usually do about 6 per episode. And some of them you have to not be vain about it. Like, some of them will not do well, you know, but some of them will go like crazy, and you sometimes just don't know. So I think the best option is to trial a lot of different things, and then you start to go, okay, learn what it is.
It's almost like if something does well, do it again and see if it was just a fluke, or is it that's the type of content that people want to see.
The best bits of content on TikTok are the ones that strike up a conversation. That give people an urge to like comment. And you know, a lot of time people will say, oh, that's just, you know, they're only going to comment if it's like controversial. That's true sometimes, but also it might be that, like, you know, being seen, like a lot of the time that we've gone viral is like someone said something on the podcast and I'm like, oh my God, I didn't realize you felt like this way. Like, I felt this way as well. So yeah, like that's how it's kind of come about.
And then, so is, again, just to sort of advise people, whether it's a podcast or any other kind of like personal brand that's trying to create on social, you've got your TikTok, you've got Instagram, you've got YouTube. Is there any other platforms that you sit on?
We use LinkedIn as well.
I was going to ask about how do you find that?
Because, well, in the beginning, I would say, like, before we started on the TikTok strategy, so we kind of each year, I guess, we kind of take on a platform that we really want to nail. Yeah. And so before TikTok, it was LinkedIn, and I grew our business page to like 10,000 followers on LinkedIn. Wow. But I think in the past year, like, we've not done as, you know, Georgia's not, my team doesn't love LinkedIn, and, you know, we've not focused on that as much as a business. But we did focus on it for 20s Fest, and we got loads of traction from it. So it is something that we're looping back into our strategy now, because I really feel like we should have kept it up over the past year, but we haven't. But we're bringing that back in now to try and continue to grow that, just because of the topics that we're talking about. It's not right for every podcast, I'm going to like put that out there, but just because the topics that we're talking about, a lot of the career side of things we can bring into it. A lot of the, like, you know, talking about, you know, even like political issues or, you know, finance and stuff like that, we wouldn't talk about the relationship stuff or all of that kind of stuff on LinkedIn, but there's loads we can put on there that makes sense to that platform. But it's hard because you're doing a different strategy for every single social media platform. It's a lot.
Yeah, that's so interesting. So what do you think are the sort of the next trends in terms of TikTok? How do people keep ahead of the trends rather than just copying the trends?
I think it's you literally have to spend a lot of time on the platform to know what's going on, really. Like, it's kind of hard to be able to predict what that kind of, where that's kind of going. But I don't think, you know, podcasting on TikTok and clips and stuff like that is going to slow down anytime soon. If anything, I think a podcast clip keeps people on the platform longer than a dancey trend does, or just like a really short form video, because it's watch time, and that's what the platforms are looking for. You know, like TikTok is launching 10-minute videos on the platform and stuff, so they're obviously wanting to keep people on there. I think the biggest challenges for podcasts is to actually, and there's no easy way to do this, is actually to get someone to go from just loving your clips on TikTok to actually being an avid listener of the podcast. So I think a lot of people will say, like, you know, oh, I love Talk 20s, but whether they've actually clicked download on an episode, they might not even done that. They might have just loved our clips, and that's still a Talk 20s fan. Like, you know, it's fun.
And it's almost like thinking like the consumer, isn't it? Like, I'd stopped listening to Happy Place for a while because I hadn't really engaged with some of the latest guests, and then Michelle Keegan has just popped up on TikTok, and so I've been listening to that this morning. But I probably might have just scrolled past that on my, you know, on my latest episodes thing. So it is interesting to think like how you consume content. So that's what I'll come back to, a little bit more of the technical side over the podcast towards the end of the podcast. But so you took on employees quite soon. You've got 3 now, is that right?
There's 3 of us, so there's myself and 2 others.
So talk about that. Was it like you found a person and thought they'd be good, or did you create the role and found the person? What was the way round of doing it? Both situations. I actually met Olivia at your event. In person. Well, kind of, sort of. So with Georgia, she was the one to join first. I actually delivered a talk at Georgia's university, and at the end of the talk, she walked up to me and said, I don't know if you're hiring, but I really want to work for you. Amazing.
And I was like, very taken aback, because at that moment in time, like I just quit my like job working for in events, and I was like, I don't know how, like you know, I'd done a bit of time on my own, and I was like, oh god, like I said, I'd still not thought about being an employer. Like I don't know what I was thinking, but I'd still not thought about it. I just thought I'd always be like on my own, like solopreneur and stuff. And I was like, okay. And then we looked at like the options for doing it. There was a really cool thing that we could do via her university that meant that you'd get a bit of support as a first time employer and stuff like that. So, and you know, it's to help like local businesses take on their first kind of employees. So we were like, okay, great. Like if we can get that support. And then, we signed our first like major sponsor. And then I was like, yeah, we can go with it. And so we brought her in. And then when I was looking to launch 20s Fest, like we started out in kind of, Olivia joined in July. Prior to that, like I was just looking for like a bit of like support and volunteering, and Olivia was still in university as well. She was doing event management, and so she had joined a Talk 20s like networking workshop at the beginning of the year that was literally just on Zoom that we just did as a trial. This is what I was saying, we've tried a lot of different things, and she happened to be on there. And then when we were at Anything Is Possible, we were in the toilets.
This is a success story.
We were in the toilets, and like she cornered me and she was like, are you Gaby Mendes? And I was like, yes. So I was like washing my hands. I was like, hi. She was like, I was on the Talk 20s like event, and I was like, oh my god. I was like, are you Olivia? She was like, yes, I'm Olivia and stuff like that. And I was like, oh, that was like, that's amazing. So we just started chatting from that, and then I was like, I think I'm going to launch 20s Fest. And she was like, oh, I just, you know, I'm an event management graduate, like I'd love to hear more about it. And I was like, okay, great. So I kept her in the loop, and as she was finishing up her degree, she just did a little bit of like volunteering, like at like a couple of hours here and there. And then I said to her, like as we were like, you know, she was just about to graduate, and I was like, look, Liv, if I gave you like a fixed month, like 3-month contract over the summer, would you want to do it? She was like, absolutely. I was like, it's literally to work on this like launching 20s Fest.
Dream job if you're an event. Amazing.
I think you know, she was quite happy that she'd like struck lucky on that. And then she came and she just did really well, and I was like, and we gelled really well as a 3. And so at the end of it, she thought she was going to go back to uni to go and do a master's full time. And me and Georgia convinced her. We sat her down and said, Liv, like, you know, come and work for us full time and do your master's part time. So she dropped down to part time, and she fits it around work now, but still works for us full time. So she stayed on after that. So really nice story.
And so George is like your content director, isn't she?
George is our creative producer, so she does all the content side of the business, and then Olivia does like more of like the business partnerships, events side of the company.
Amazing. So what would you say is there a moment that you can say it kind of popped off, like a clip or an episode where you thought that?
I think there's just been quite a few like mini moments that I think that have happened where it's like, and it's when kind of everything all comes together and you kind of feel like, oh, it's going, but that happens, and then you'll have a couple of months where it goes, oh, like, you know, you don't have that as much excitement. I think there was a period like probably June to October of this year when every single clip that we put out on social and every single episode was doing really, really well. And so I think 20s Fest was huge for us, because I think that kind of solidified, you know, we're so much more than like just the podcast and what we're doing and what we're building. And, you know, not only can we do a podcast, but we can actually bring all those people together in real life and do a festival. Like, I think that was kind of pivotal.
So tell our listeners about, so let's immerse them in. They bought a ticket to 20th Fest, which is in October 23. Explain the experience from end to end to them.
Yeah, so it was a 7-hour event, and we had 3 different stages that all had different talks on. So we had like a live music like stage and a friend zone area where you could like network and meet other people. We had like good like networking facilitators. We had these little things on your phone where you could scan them and you could get people's details and stuff like that.
Oh, that's cool.
So it was opportunities to like make friends. We had loads of different companies with different stands around the event as well, so you could go up to them, and you know they were all interactive. Gamification, so we had, you know, challenges, activities, like free goodies, like all the way around there. You could get your bag full of, you know, all different bag full of swag. We had Lush were our goodie bag partner, so we had loads of like Lush goodies and giveaways, which was amazing. And then we had the 3 main stages. So Charlie Marlowe was our host,
who, if you don't follow Charlie
she's
Marlowe
amazing
on TikTok, I am obsessed with her. She's just hilarious. I could spend hours watching
everything she just says. Like she just says a sentence like, and you just laugh at it. It's just funny. And then we had Saskia Marriott host the other stage, and we had loads of different like speakers, you know, all covering all different topics. So we had, you know, ones that was like, help, I hate my job, how to navigate like feeling lonely. We had someone who was like from back bedroom to 7 million in revenue, like entrepreneur, and they've actually just gone and got investment on Dragon's Den.
They were literally on, for people who want to watch them, they were on Dragon's Den this week, weren't they? Lux.
Yeah, Ben Gallagher and Lux Collective. So we had all different speakers and panel sessions covering all different topics. And a full day of it.
Yeah, I mean, sadly I couldn't go because we had events on with Make Events, but I had total FOMO looking at it. I just looked absolutely insane. And we'll put a link in the show notes because once you do it again, people can obviously sign up to go and everything. So you became an employer, and you sort of this. I'm really interested in this, like commerciality, the brand partnerships, monetizing it. Have you had any funding, any investment? Like how? So I would say, like with Make Events, it was easy for us because when I say easy, we took a deposit for our first event, which then in advance of the event paid to like secure the suppliers. So it's always been bankrolled essentially, Make. Whereas anything is possible is like an investment for me, and it won't break even for a while yet. If you share what you're comfortable sharing, but how have you funded it? And obviously
everything to this point has been bootstrapped, but we're about to go into a stage where the next stage is like quite big, so we're raising investment to kind of go into this next stage, but like using everything that we've learned so far, so we're not starting from scratch and raising, like we've got like a very clear plan. So I think bootstrapping can get you like so far, and I honestly think that we could do this next stage like and still bootstrap. I just think it would take us longer to get there, and I think the industry is moving so quick that I kind of just want to jump on it now. Like, and also like the people that we're bringing in to support us on that, like our advisors, and can help us with that process. So that's where we're at right now. So I think it can be done, and I think we just, I've done every single part of the business. So I've done graphic design, I've done editing, I've done obviously hosting, I've done finance, I've done brand partnerships, I've done every single area of the company. And then it's now bringing in the right people in the right positions who can slowly take parts of that job away from me, and obviously make it work financially.
One thing I wanted to ask you actually, and I think it's something that we get asked a lot about, is learning. So you're obviously traditional university background, you've been a teacher, but it seems to me like you've had to learn so many different skills to launch this business. How do you best learn?
By doing.
Yeah,
just cracking on and giving it a go. But also, I would also say like tap into like who you know. Like if I've got a question about like recruitment and HR, my brother runs like a recruitment company, I'll ask him. If I want a question about finance or something like that, I have specific people that I would go to. If I have a question that's specifically about content, I know who I'd ask about those things. And I think it's about having that kind of connection and being okay to just ask the question, be like, could you just help me with this like one thing? And more than enough times people have just wanted to help.
Do you know what's really interesting? Because one of the episodes of this series is with Matthew Scullion, who's founder of Monetising, which is a unicorn type business, and he says exactly the same. He said we need to be more Silicon Valley. So in Silicon Valley, it's all about your black book and who you know. And he said it's about being vulnerable. It's like 100%. if you haven't done something but or can find somebody that has, just like being vulnerable and picking up the phone and saying, look, I really need help with this. Hence me asking you all these questions during the podcast to help me. Okay. You also mentioned to me before you have a life coach. I'm a massive believer in mentorship and life coaches. Is that the first coach that you've had?
Yeah.
Talk to me about that, because I mean, I'm
Lucy,
all for
she's
that.
like she's a really good friend of mine now. And she's like, only like a few years younger than my mum, but we get on so well. And it came about during lockdown. We both spoke online at like one of those Zoom events that everyone was doing at the time. And off the back of it, she was like, should we just like have a call? Like, because I feel like, there's a couple of things I could help you with. And we just immediately gelled. And it was so good. And, we've just built that relationship over like a really long time now. So we've now become really good friends. And I still meet with her like regularly once a week.
God, that's really good, isn't it?
Yeah, as much as we can, especially in pivotal moments like right now, like just before 20s Fest, and right now when we're obviously going through all like the business growth and stuff like that, there'll be moments where, you know, we're both, you know, all groovy and stuff and don't need to worry about that. But I've never said groovy on a podcast in my whole life.
It fits some of our demographic really well, actually, Gaby, thank you. Okay. So you talk about, just to come, I guess, off topic of business, one of your pillars, your content pillars, is fun and adventure. When setting up a business, it was really interesting actually. I was listening to another of your podcasts, and so I come from the hustle culture, so it is very difficult for me to not work every hour that God sends, and setting up a business requires more than an average person is willing to give out, so everyone would do it. Now, I know that you're not a big believer in the hustle culture, but it must be taking a lot to do what you're doing. So how do you have fun and adventure, or is it just work, and it feels like fun and adventure at the moment? Because
there's definitely a little bit of that, like definitely that I enjoy the work that I do, so it doesn't feel like hustling, because like ultimately I'm finding fun in what I'm hustling for. But at the same time, like I do think you have to have that balance where it's like, you know, you either chill out or you are taking time for yourself, and I think that's really, really, really key. Because otherwise, who are you doing it for? Like I had someone, and I won't name names, but I had someone sit on the other side of the sofa to me this week, and they said, you know, I don't really spend much time with like my family and stuff because I'm just so constantly growing this, and you know, they'll be in 10 years time, this will be where I want it to be, and they'll still be there, and you know, I'm just so focused on this that I don't really look elsewhere. And I said, what about their health? Like what about your family's health? Like what, that's not always going to be there and stuff, and I don't want to close myself off to all of those things. So I like to make sure that, you know, I'm still home to see my family, which are 3 hours away, for you know, every big major family occasion. You know, when it's birthdays, I go like usually have a party and all those kinds of things, and just ultimately just enjoying spending time, going away with my, you know, with my best friend last year, and trying to find that time to enjoy life, because otherwise what you're doing all this hustling for.
So I'm always fascinated with time and time management. Would you say you're good at managing your time?
No, got better. Yeah.
What is a tip? I know you can never say a typical week, but what is your routine? What time do you get up? What do you do before work? Like what's a typical?
So I usually, so my alarm goes off at 8 would be nice, 6:45. 6:45, and I will either like snooze it a couple of times, or I'll get up depending of like what my day is looking like. And then just walk my dog, have my usual like breakfast, and then if I'm working from home, then I'll probably be at my desk for about 8. If I'm into the office, then I won't usually get in for 8. It'll probably be about 7:30. And then every day really is different, because sometimes I'll be recording, sometimes I'll be with guests, sometimes I'll be out at events, sometimes I'll just be in like meetings all day. But I try, and I think this is like my biggest thing that I've got to try and get better at, is trying to find more time for exercise, and for hobbies that I like enjoy doing. But I spend a lot of time with like my fiance as well and stuff. So
what about weekends? Are you working at weekends?
No, I don't work at weekends. No, as much as I can, like, unless something really, really needs to get done, I switch off at weekends. And that never used to be the case, because obviously I used to do this. I've really flipped. So I used to do this business in the evenings and weekends, and then now I've flipped it.
So 5 to 9.
Exactly. Whereas now I don't really do that. My weekends are for me, and that is a big thing that's massively shifted. So it'll only be like, say, you know, a Sunday night if I've got a podcast the next day, that last little bit of prep, or just something that I really haven't had chance to catch up on in the week, I will do at the weekends. But no work, like I won't be messaging my team or anything like that, or no, God no.
And what sort of productivity hacks do you have? Like, are you a Grace Beverly, like full, like the digital planner, or like what are your things that you like to use?
So I'm just big on like iCal and calendar, like everything has to be in the calendar. If it's like an important meeting, or just everything has to go in there. Like I have shared calendars with like my fiance and with my team, so like we know when we're, you know, is very big on that. And then Notion is what we use to plan and plan and like notes, projects, and do everything, project plan, all of those kind of things.
So you've obviously got 20s Fest, and we were talking before about you feel like you are a serial entrepreneur and there's going to be, you know, other things to come. Do you feel that things will shift every decade for you? Like what is kind of in, I know there's things happen you can't talk about, but do you see multiple businesses ahead or multiple strands of 20s?
Yeah, definitely. I think we'll like this blueprint that we've kind of, we're calling it like a blueprint that we've built for like Talk 20s and 20s Fest doesn't just have to exist for what we've built. Like it can definitely work across so many different, you know, ideas and just in different kind of ways, different communities and niches and stuff. So we're working on something that can help us do that because, and also like Talk 20s is so much more than me. Like it like obviously I'm 28 now, so in a couple of years time people will probably think, you know, what's she gonna do? But like it's a whole team now and they're all in their early 20s. Like it's not really anything not really to do with me anymore. I don't think you have to be in your 20s
to lead it because you've then got a whole decade of experience within that decade to share, haven't you? So and it's just I've spoken to so many people about being in your 20s now that like I've become a weird sort of expert in all of the random different areas. So it'll take a while to train someone up to kind of do the same. So. And within your content pillars, what are you seeing the main things that people are struggling with in their 20s at the moment?
I think especially with the cost of living crisis and everything like that, a lot of young people, you know, they're still really ambitious. They want to save to buy their first home. They want to, you know, save to do the things that they want to enjoy in life. And ultimately they're getting their paycheck and it's going straight towards all their bills and everything that's going up. So I think it's really difficult because I don't think that wages are necessarily going up at the same rate, which is very, very tricky. So ultimately you're seeing a lot of young people use their time outside of work to add to their income and do a lot of side hustling, I think. And so we have a lot of I would say that like if we had to like survey our audience, a large percentage of them would have some kind of side hustle, whether that's just freelancing on the side or wanting to eventually turn that into a business one day, etc., etc. So I think that is like the biggest probably thing that's coming out of like the younger generation.
I didn't realise that.
Yeah, because it's really tough. Like, you know, if you're wanting to, you know, save for your first, there's just, you know, I mean, I remember actually my full-time job, I had a couple of other things on the go, one being an Antimus party planner, and then the other I used to do like mystery shopping, but I used to love that like side, I mean it was much cheaper then, but like that side income to be able to do with what I wanted. So I guess it's like that. And what are you seeing are the mental health problems that people in the 20s are having at the moment? Is that still as high as it was? Is it driven by social media? Like what are you seeing on the mental health side of things? Yeah, definitely. I think there's obviously you're just stepping into adult life. You've been flung all these responsibilities. We've just been through a pandemic. A lot of young people have either been in university or just stepping out into their careers or getting into building their careers. We've seen a lot of rejection. A lot of had to show a lot of resilience during that time, and I think all of that is kind of boiling and coming to the kind of the surface because it's been like tough going on young people. So I think there's a lot of challenges there, but I would say a lot of the things that we see where people are really struggling is often with like relationships and the impacts that those can have on your life. You know, I mean, a lot of people like have fallouts with partners or you know, they have their first big relationships that break down and you think your future's going to go one way and it completely doesn't. So I think that's a lot of what we see from the mental health side of things and just loneliness as well. Like, you know, it's very hard. We're going ever digital into our world. How do we find that connection? And so we've seen a lot of that 20s Fest where we kind of got people together and it was really nice.
So we're saying like within that within the 20s decade we're looking at like loneliness, cost of living, people having to find extra income in other ways. How are you finding or do you get much feedback on like gender identity, because obviously that's a massive thing at the moment? Is that something that people, because I'm guessing people do kind of confide in you, I bet you get a lot of messages and things like that?
Yeah, definitely. We've got some, you know, it's not like something that I'm an expert I can speak on, but we have some amazing people that are coming onto the podcast to speak about that in the coming weeks and stuff. So it is massive. It's a conversation that is really important in this moment in time and needs to be vocalized and needs to be heard. So yeah, absolutely.
I think there's a big thing around as well, like we had a guy called Nick Eade on the podcast, and I think he might have just been 50, I can't believe he is because he doesn't look it, but we were talking about kind of gender identity and that education piece up and down. So as much as like younger people, teens and people in their 20s will get frustrated with older people because they don't know what to say or how to say it or don't understand it, there's also got to be that understanding upwards to say, well, of course they don't, because they've lived in a generation where this is never considered. I heard a speaker the other day and they are agender, so they don't identify as any gender, which I hadn't come across before. And when they explained it, actually, they did a talk, it was really powerful, and it definitely gave me more of an understanding of the struggles that people go through. So I think if you're sharing that within your podcast, I think it would be amazing to almost get that out to older people as well, because it is just in a common understanding, and just, look, we're not going to profess that everybody understands everything, but just that little bit of understanding, I think, is really, really important to raise awareness.
Yeah, I think that those kind of topics are exactly what like we're kind of set up to do, to kind of, you know, allow young people to have the voices, and whether that's listened to by any age group, but it gives them a voice and a platform to say, this is how we think, and then of course any generation can listen in and go, oh, okay, that makes way more sense now to hear two young people talking about the topic, rather than, you know, politicians and stuff like that.
And do you have you had like any success stories you're aware of in terms of somebody's maybe had a mental health issue, they've listened to your podcast, it's resonated with them, it's helped them? Like, do you get feedback like that about the podcast?
Yeah, we get messages all the time. Like I have a little folder in my phone called the Hype Files, and every time we get like a message from a listener or something like that, like we will screenshot it and I'll put it in there, because every time you have a day where you're just like, oh, nothing's going right, or whatever, you just go in there and you can like have a little look through and remind yourself of like why you do it. So yeah, it's really important.
Well, I remember when I had OCD, and obviously podcasts weren't a thing then, and I remember going, and I didn't know what was happening for me, and I was told by the doctor it was intrusive thoughts, but I'd never heard of intrusive thoughts, so I at that point I couldn't distinguish between what was real and what wasn't. And I remember going to the doctors, and This Morning was on, and there was a woman talking about intrusive thoughts, and she'd been having intrusive thoughts about harming her children. And OCD is a really complex topic, but I remember, and they weren't what my thoughts were, but I remember listening to this TV program and going, oh, that's somebody talking about intrusive thoughts. I've never heard of it before. I've only heard it from my doctor, and now I'm hearing it on TV, and it started. So it just shows like the awareness, like of all different subjects, how important it is to get out there. And has feedback driven content sometimes. So if you had people say to you, look, I really want to know more about this, and that set you off to search for content.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Right, like we definitely get like feedback from our audience, like saying, you know, we really want to hear you talk about this topic or that topic, and then we one of the biggest things we did for 20s Fest is we got people to fill in like a great big survey. It's like, what do you actually want us to cover? And then we use those topics to actually formulate what were the actual talks that we were going to do. And we thought about the talks before we thought about the talent to them, or the people who were going to come to speak at it. We thought about, okay, what's the topic we want?
What do they want?
And then who could we bring in to speak about it, rather than finding the other way around.
So if you are hopefully changing lives, improving people's lives, like apart from the mission of Talk Twenties, like what is your mission as a person? Like what are you doing this for? What's your purpose and motivation?
So I think, like, obviously I'm a girl who did an education degree, so ultimately deep down I want to educate people, but I also am super creative, and so I feel like you can be educational but you can be entertained at the same time. You want to tune in, or you want to go to that event, even though technically you're going to learn something from it. It's going to be enjoyable, like it's going to be relatable, it's going to be an experience that you ultimately love, so it doesn't feel like learning anymore. So I think that educational entertainment side of things is just what I'm always going to be very, very passionate about, and it's just going to thread through like everything that I do, I think.
I think I'm the same. Like I went to an all-girls school, which I would never recommend, and I didn't go to university, and I remember my headmistress saying to me at the time, are you not going to university because you've got a boyfriend? And I was like, no, I just don't, I want it. And I remember my dad saying to me, and I guess he was quite modern at the time, like he basically, again, another old-fashioned word, we've had groovy and modern in the same podcast, but he basically said to me, get your qualification so you can do your degree, so you can always say that you could do it, and then if you want to work, that's fine. And that's what I did. But I've always loved learning. I'm just not good at learning in the traditional way. Like I tried to do my CAM in marketing about 10 years ago, and I just cannot learn in that environment. I've just signed up for Steve Bartlett's course that he's doing with BBC Maestro. I've just signed up for a body confidence course. Like I love consuming content in the way that it is now. I feel like like I said to you before, that it wasn't available in my 20s, I feel like I would have responded. And even things like when you talk about school, so in terms of sports, I hated sports at school. I would do anything to get out of sports. I would be in sick bay, all of that kind of thing. Yet now I'm a real gym bunny because I've done it the way. And I believe even now that sports in schools is still taught in quite a traditional way. Like there's not many schools with like gyms where you can just go to the gym or do classes, is there? I don't know. But I think that I think there's it's like Gary Neville. Do you know much about Gary Neville's university, the UA92?
A small amount, yeah.
So because he's come under like Alex Ferguson's leadership, they operate that much more like work. So for example, I think, and forgive me if I've got this wrong, but when you get your education for the semester or whatever, you pick whether you do morning or afternoon so that you can plan. So basically all your education could be in the morning, so you plan for all your follow-up in the afternoon, like you would if you're planning a diary to work, rather than like ad hoc stuff that means you can lie in one day, not the next, and all of that, and just using that work framework. So there's a lot of work to be done, which I know you're super passionate about, aren't you?
That's super interesting. I didn't know. That's really cool.
Really interesting. So I know that question that you ask your guests is, what are you struggling with now? Now when I meet you, I'm like super impressed. You're such a powerhouse. You know, I'm looking to you for advice on what you're doing, but what do you struggle with?
I struggle with probably committing to too much. I definitely I don't know if it's just like January, like when we're recording this, but like in the past few days, I've had so many people like just want to like, can I pick your brains about something? Can I ask, can you do this? And like, I genuinely can't fit it into my diary because I'm actually traveling for like 3 days of every week this week. So I'm having to like, I hate saying no. Like I'm having to say no to obviously like, or not right now, basically like, can we catch up in Feb? Like, is it okay if it waits until the next month? Because like I like to bite off more than I can chew. Like, and I do that quite a lot, which can then provide the stress and the pressure, because when are you going to fit it all in? Which then creeps into your own free time and stuff like that. So like it's I find it very difficult to say no like to things, because I always think, what if like that could be the opportunity that does this? And
I don't know if you feel this, I always used to feel like I don't want people to think I've got too big headed, or I'm too big for my boots, or I don't need you anymore, that kind of thing.
No, I'm so like I want to make sure that, and like everyone that's obviously helped me along the way, like I said, I ask people for help all the time. Like I want to be able to do that. I'm just physically like not at my desk, so like I can't like on the days where I am chocker. So and do you think if you were a listener of Talk Twenties, of your 4 pillars, which would be the one that you would listen to the most, do you think? Oh, that's a great one. At
this moment in time,
I think I'd listen to the relationships one, because I'm getting married.
Oh yeah,
so I think it's like, that's quite interesting. So
setting yourself up for the best possible. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about content, but one thing I sometimes ask guests about, Gabby, is what would have plan B been? And if you hadn't set up Talk Twenties, what job do you think you might be in? And you reminded me of something which we thought would be quite funny to share, didn't we?
Do you want me to read it out, Holly?
I think so.
So this is an email that I've got from December 2019, and it's from Make Events. Not from Holly specifically, but one of the team I had spoke to because I'd applied for the role of event coordinator to work here at Make Events, and this is the email that I got on the 1st of December 2019. Hi Gabby, thank you for your time on the phone. Hi Gabby, thank you for your time on the phone for the role of event coordinator. Since we've advertised for the role, we've had an astonishing amount of interest from candidates of various experience levels. We thank you for your time during the telephone interview, but unfortunately we will not be progressing with your application on this occasion. In another life, I could have worked for you, Holly.
What a loss. What a loss. And then we realised when you shared that with your team that Olivia, which I do remember Olivia actually, because she applied directly to me. Olivia on your team applied for a job here and didn't get it. I think it was only an experience thing. But one thing I would always say about Olivia, and I say this so much to everyone, Olivia stood out to me because she sent me a gift. She'd like branded some chocolate and stuff like that. And I often get, which I'm sure you get, if you got an advice when applying for a job, whether it be an event, and I'm like, stand out. Like literally, like if you can email, if you can turn up at the door, if you can send something. And Olivia, like, I remember distinctly, and you said she's doing amazing as well.
Yeah, she's doing really well. Great.
Gutted about that. Can you imagine the things we could have done together?
I know, it's crazy, isn't it?
Fair,
in another life.
You were definitely over event coordinator. Okay, I think so we come to the end of the podcast, I think that vulnerability is a massive thing, and I think something I've heard you talk about is you are quite driven, as I am, by the likes, the engagement, the listens and all of that. And you know, I think on the outside it's really, you know, for me, for someone that's starting out in the podcast world, and I'm running it, as you say, alongside running a big business, I'm sometimes disappointed with the engagement and the figures, and it's getting over that embarrassment of like, oh, that's not had much engagement, but I just have to keep going. I always think of Joe Wicks, just keep going, keep going. Is that still something that would affect you now if something didn't get as much engagement as you were hoping?
Definitely. I think it always still has like an impact no matter what stage, especially when you start getting to a certain point and then it has little drops and peaks and stuff like that. So I think ultimately, because like listens and downloads feeds back into the whole, you know how do you bring in sponsors and all that kind of stuff. It's, you know,
the whole
it's always
ecosystem,
it's just a part of that, you know, the same way you would be, you know, disappointed if the finance weren't coming in or you didn't have the right team to do it and stuff. So I definitely think it definitely plays into it. The one thing I'll say about podcasting, and I've said it a few times, is that like a lot of people put podcast listens down to, like in the same bracket as like likes on social media or views on social media. It is completely different in my opinion. I kind of liken a podcast download to somewhere between someone engaging with and liking your post on social media and someone buying your book. And the reason is, like, buying your book, that costs money, but it also takes time, like 6 hours to read. But like someone has to get off a social media platform to click play on your episode, and they have to listen to it for 45 minutes. They have to give you like whatever your time is for it to like, for that's what it means. Like and so it is not people put like them in this like social media posts and podcasts in the same breath, and it's just such a different communication. You're getting such a deeper level of connection with your audience than them just seeing like a scrolling and seeing just like, you know, a random post. So I think if anyone who is starting a podcast, don't be disheartened by the numbers, because it's not you're measuring apples and pears basically.
And another thing you said is, let me get this right, 100% of the people are not seeing 100% of your content all the time. In terms of, it's the most important thing to you, but I guess you're in the middle of a huge ocean. Just talk me through that, because I found that to be really interesting. So like 100% so not 100% of your audience are seeing 100% of your like marketing. Like, so you're looking at it like, oh, we just did a post on that last week, but like not everyone will have seen that. So I think it's more about putting out stuff, and as long as it's authentic to what you're doing, like not being afraid to say things a few times over, like especially if you've got core like values and missions and things that you want to say, like say it 5 different ways and put all of those things out and see what works. Don't be afraid, like, oh, we put that post out like 2 months ago, people won't remember it. They've moved on. They've seen a lot of content since then. It's really interesting. Well, I've absolutely loved having you on the podcast, and I hope it hasn't been too indulgent, because just basically picking your brains to improve what we do. The last sort of question before we move on to the anything is possible question is, for myself, for anybody out there on a podcast, how many would you say average listens or downloads do you think you have to have per episode before you can start monetizing and you know, approaching brands with credibility? Like, how many would you say?
Completely dependent on what your podcast is about. So I think if you have like a specific niche that you operate in, so say you have a podcast that is like specifically for like top level CEOs and directors and stuff like that, like that, it might be helpful that you have 50 downloads on that, because that's 50 of like, you know, people with a lot of you know, backing. And so having a little, you know, ad read in that could be a really valuable thing to a client. It could lead to a lot of leads. But you know, on the other end of the spectrum, like it might be more of a numbers game where you need to get loads of downloads in order to be able to do that. So I think it's more about not about the number and stressing about that, but more about how can you tailor your offering to the audience that you've got, to then the people that might want to speak to that audience. So it really is dependent.
I remember Better Health, because we bumped into each other at the podcast show as well, see each other everywhere. And Better Health, who sponsor a lot of podcasts, they said they have like obviously varying degrees of packages. They'll start to look at from 1,000, which I actually thought was pretty achievable for, you know, for you know, starting out podcasts, I guess. But obviously that would depend on like the genre of the podcast. But well, like you say, even sometimes I think even if it was like a contra for a partnership, but you're able to speak about a big brand on your on your podcast, that actually elevates you anyway. So there's loads of ways of being creative, I think, as well.
100%. You just got to go for it.
So before we conclude the podcast, Gaby, a question I ask everybody is, what does anything is possible mean to you?
I think anything is possible is just that internal belief that like no matter like no matter what, you've got it. Like, you've got it
Yeah.
within you to do what it is that you want to do. So I think, yeah, it's that kind of internal self-belief that deep down is a little spark, but I think it grows and grows and grows the more that you kind of lean into it and trust yourself.
Yeah, Dan Rhodes, who's been in the podcast, he's 19 at the time actually, he said, if it's been done before, it can be done again. So if somebody's done it, you can definitely do it. But I want to thank you for coming on the podcast. I know you're so busy, and for just inspiring. I wish I'd had you when I was in my 20s and what you're doing. It's so inspiring. And I think similar to us, I don't think you'll just be inspiring people in the 20s. I think you'll be inspiring people across all decades. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. I love it.
Thank you.